everybody, I'm Pia from Stitches and Scraps, and today I want to show you the basics of this technique called intermeshing, or sometimes interlocking crochet. So intermeshing crochet is basically two layers of a filet crochet mesh. If you're familiar with filet crochet, you're used to seeing this mesh. It's basically double crochets and spaces in between the double crochets. So if you have two layers of that and you overlap them, you can actually pull one layer through this way and one layer through the other way, and you can create these geometric patterns depending on which layer shows on the front and which one shows on the back. And that is the basic premise of intermeshing crochet. What you're actually going to be doing is working both these layers at the same time, and as you work them, pulling it forward sometimes and backwards other times. So let's take a look at how to do that. The most common way to start a piece of intermeshing crochet is to take the two separate pieces of mesh and line them up one on top of another so that they overlap. Now they're going to be offset not only in the stitches, you can see that this double crochet falls under this chain space, but also in the rows. This piece of mesh is below this piece of mesh by about half a row. It's a difference of about a single crochet because these are double crochets, and that's going to be important in the second technique I teach you, so I just wanted to point it out. Once you have your two layers of mesh lined up, pick up the lower one, pick up the loop from the lower one, and we're going to start with a chain 3 for the double crochet and a chain 1 to make our first chain space in our mesh. So that puts this double crochet in front of this chain space. Okay, so for my next one, I want to work behind the chain space because I'm going to alternate to get me that zigzag kind of look. So what I'm going to do is put everything behind this chain space. So I do my yarn over, and I'm going to stick my hook in from the back and pull this stitch out. I'm actually putting my hook in the stitch, pull this stitch out behind the chain space. So the chain space should be able to just fold forward and be out of the way. Everything now is at the back behind the chain space. Your working yarn, your hook, everything. So we pull up our loop and we finish our double crochet just like we normally would. And now you can see that whole double crochet is behind the chain space. It's not connected to it. We didn't work around it. You can pull this whole piece out through the chain space. If you work around it, that'll lock it in place, and that's not what you want. So what I mean by that is don't do this. Don't work around it where this is crossing over that chain. For our next one, we're actually going to work in front. So I am going to use this motion, but now watch what I do. I scoop up underneath that chain space. So everything I have is in front, completely separate. And then I finish my double crochet. Oops, I forgot. Before I do that, I have to do a chain 1 to make the next hole in our mesh. So every time you do a double crochet, you're going to have to do a chain 1 to make the gap. Okay, so now I do my double crochet in the front, and that's how it's referred to in the patterns too. This is a double crochet in the back, and this is a double crochet at the front. So this one you can see completely separate and in front of this chain space. So now I'm going to skip the next stitch here. I'm going to do my chain 1 for my mesh, and I'm coming in behind this chain space to do a double crochet in the back. Let's see another one in the front. Do your chain 1 and then come in front, pull this up, and finish your double crochet in the front. I'm going to keep doing this, alternating back and front, making sure I do my chain space, making sure that I align it correctly because this chain space here actually goes behind this stitch. So I want to make sure I'm not now working under that one again. I have to go through this one to get this stitch in the back. Chain 1 and continue the row like this. So now I've come to the end of the row, and I'm not going to go any further with this piece because I just wanted to show you how these attach. If I was to go further, I would leave this aside, come back here and pick up the pink and work the next row into the pink like that, or the next part of this row into the pink, and continue on and so forth. But what I don't like about this method is it leaves the bottom open. If you use this method of starting, you have to come back afterwards and do a edging or something to join these two ends. Otherwise, you just have open floppy ends, and that's just no good. So I did my blanket a completely different way, and that's the one I want to really show you, and then we'll go further with that one. For this method, I've started with a row of single crochet. I have an odd number here, and I've actually used foundation single crochet because I like the way it looks at the bottom. If you're not going to do an edging, I recommend foundation single crochet or working into the back bump. Either one will give you a nice finished edge. If you are going to do an edging, it really doesn't matter. Any single crochet will do. But you need an odd number, and then what we're going to do is we're going to start building the mesh up off of this single crochet row. So this becomes our border then. Now, if you remember from the previous one, the rows are offset by about the space of a single crochet. They're offset by half a row. So in order to get that offset, I'm going to work just the first row that I do, which is actually, this is row 1, so just row 2. One color I'm going to work single crochet, and one color I'm going to work double crochets. So let's start with the single crochets. I've done a chain 1, and I turn my work. So now I'm making a single crochet mesh. So what that is single crochet, chain 1, skip 1, and then single crochet all the way across. This one's easy enough. Chain 1, skip 1, single crochet. I finished this row, and as you can see, the chain spaces are almost invisible because I've used single crochet, but we can find them. First, let's take this loop and pull it out really big so that we're not going to lose it. It's not going to pull out. If you feel more comfortable, you can actually secure it with a stitch marker so that you know you're not going to lose that. Now I've zoomed in a little bit so you can see if I pull this apart, you start to see the gaps. And underneath the gap, there's a chain space, right? And underneath that chain space is the stitch that we're going to work into. Okay, so it's going to take a little effort to find those just for this first row, but after that it gets easier because we're using double crochets. So here is my first stitch of the row, and here is the skip stitch that's underneath that first chain space. This is the first stitch I'm going to be working into when I start the second half of the row. Once you've gotten to the mesh portion, everything in intermeshing is worked twice. Each row is worked twice. You're going to work across once in the first color, and then you're going to work across again in the second color, starting from the same point. So that's why I've set this aside, because I'm done with the first half of this row. Now we're going to pick up the second half. So to start with, we're going to work in that stitch that I pointed out, but I want to work into it from behind. So just like I did before, I'm going to stick my hook under from the back and pull this out to the back. You can actually fold that chain space down, and you should have everything at the back of the chain space here. Okay? And I'm going to join with a slip stitch. All right, that's my slip stitch. Now I'm going to chain 4 because 1, 2, 3 counts as our double crochet, and 1 counts as our chain space. So that's my first stitch, and you can see now that that stitch is behind this chain space. So now I find the next chain space. There it is. See, there's a stitch and there's a chain space there. So now I find the next chain space, and I want to work in front on this one. So insert my hook from the front and pull it up, everything in front, nothing wrapped over, everything's right in front of that chain space. And I do my double crochet. And chain 1, and now I'm going to go behind for the next one and do my double crochet. Pull it out to the back, everything at the back, and do your double crochet. Okay, you're starting to see that now I'm forming a nicer mesh, and it's offset from this row by half a stitch. So let's keep going. This one's in front, and you can see how I use this hook part of my hook to scoop that out into the front. so that I can do my stitch in front of the chain space. And then remember to chain one between your stitches to continue to form the mesh. And this one goes behind and in front. Okay, I finished the row. There's no more chain spaces left. There's just this one single crochet. I'm going to zoom out a little bit and show you something. So let me pull this out. Okay, so you can see that this color, there's actually less stitches of it. This color I'm calling the inside color because it sits inside my piece. This color is my outside color because it forms the outside edges on the sides. So we don't even need any side borders or edging later because it's going to get a nice edge from this outside color. The inside color doesn't contribute to the edge in any way, so there will always be one stitch left over on each side when you finish the inside color. Okay, so I've set the inside color aside, but now here's where it gets a little tricky. I can either leave this in front of my work like this, or I can leave it behind my work like that. And it does matter because where you leave it will determine where the next stitch pops up on the next row when you work this color on the next row. So in this case, I'm going to leave it behind my work. Okay, so this yarn that I had dropped in the back is now in the front because I've turned, and I'm going to start my next row. I could start with a chain 3, but instead, because I want a nicer, prettier edge, I'm going to start with a chainless starting double crochet, which means I pull it up tall, wrap it around my hook just like a yarn over, but instead I'm using the actual loop. And I'm holding this because if I don't hold it, it falls apart. So hold this with your finger, wrap, insert into the stitch, pull up a loop. Now you have 3 loops just like you would for a regular double crochet, and you can finish your double crochet just like you normally would. And that one's a little bit loose, but you get the idea. It looks more like a double crochet. Let's do it again. So pull up the loop big, wrap it around, insert, drop a loop. I have 3 loops on my hook. I can finish a double crochet like normal. So there's my chainless starting double crochet, and now I'm going to go on to complete the mesh. So I do a chain 1, and this yarn is in front, so I'm going to leave it there. And this one I want to work in front, so I'm going to yarn over and bring this up in front and do my double crochet in the front. Now look what's happened to this yarn. It's trapped over here. That's exactly where I want it, which is fine. But if I wanted to pick this yarn up from the back, I couldn't do it. It's not there. So this yarn will come in front over this chain space because of where I've placed it. So it's very important when you drop the yarn of your inside color, it's very important to drop it on the correct side. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to pick it up where you want to pick it up. If I had dropped it to this side, and then I did that same stitch, now I have to pick it up at the back. Now it's going to be behind this chain space. So you can see why it matters. So let's put it back where I want it. I want it over here, and I'm doing my double crochet in the front. And now I'm going to start alternating again and do a chain 1, double crochet in the back, chain 1, double crochet in the front. Now notice as I'm doing this, from this point forward, whatever color I'm working, I'm only going to be working into the same color. Well, there's color changes, but if I'm working with an outside yarn, I'm only going to be working into the outside color stitches. If I'm working with the inside yarn, I'm only going to be working into the inside color stitches. And basically what that does is it creates 2 completely separate layers that just happen to be intertwined. Nothing about the layers are worked together, they're just worked around each other. And that's what creates that really neat kind of squishy feeling. It's actually a very, very dense, squishy, soft fabric when you do this. Okay, and then last stitch, it's not behind or in front of anything, it's really just a double crochet on the last one. And that is that row, or the first part of that row, finished. So now that's the first part of row 3. And you can start to see how this mesh is forming. Where I've gone in front, I have vertical lines, and where I've gone behind, I get horizontal bars of the opposite color. So that gives me kind of that stair-step zigzag feeling. If I do another row, you'll really get to see that. So let's do that. This yarn is now in front, right where I want it to be. So I put that yarn on my hook and it's already in front. So I really just have to do my double crochet. And again, I can do chain 3. This one's not on the edge, so it's not as important. I can do the chain 4 if I want to, 3 for the double crochet and 1 for the chain space. I choose to do the chainless starting double crochets anyway for all of them, just because I like the way it looks better, but chain 3 is fine too, and then the extra chain is for that chain space. So now this one, I want to work in the back because this one's in front, right? It's in front of this chain space. So this one I'm going to put in the back. So I yarn over and I come through from the back and pull it out the back. Okay. Chain 1. This one I want to do in front. So I pull it out through the front. And then in back, go under, pull it out through the back. And so on and so forth all the way down this row. And that is the end of row 3, and you can now really see this stair-step pattern forming, the zigzag pattern. So counting rows in intermeshing is kind of hard. You have to count them sort of in pairs, okay? All you have to really remember is that the first time we used this inside color, we did a single crochet row on the outside color. So this single crochet and this double crochet are our first row, which means that this double crochet matches up with this double crochet. This is our second row. So if you count them in pairs like that, then you can see that I've done 1 row, and actually you can count them backwards a little bit better here. So I've done 1 row here with the single crochet in this double, and then 1 row here with this double and this double. So that is 2 rows plus the single crochet row that I started with for my foundation. So I have 1, 2, 3 rows completed. And that is how you count. You can also just count your outside color rows. So then you have 1, 2, 3 rows completed. Now you'll notice that our layers are still offset. This color does not match up to that color exactly. There's a gap there because that's how we started it. So what we'll have to do when we finish is we'll have to do an edging to bring this color up to that level. And the way we do that is where it's lower, we work a double crochet, and where it's higher, we work a single crochet. So let me just do a quick little edging on this just to show you. So I'm starting from the edge where I have a lower stitch, so I'm going to start with a double crochet, and I'm using my chainless starting double crochet just like I've been doing. And now for this edging, I want to tie everything together. So I'm going to work through stitches of both colors, not just one color. So here I'm going to do a single crochet into this stitch, which is taller. And then I'm working into this stitch, which is shorter, so I'm going to do a double crochet, and I want that to be in front, so I'm doing a double crochet in front. And then into this stitch, I'll do another single crochet. Now this one, I want a double crochet in the back. And you notice these single crochets are basically instead of our chain spaces. Single crochet, and then a double crochet in the front, and a single crochet, and keep going like this, going back and front, and every time you would normally make a chain space, instead of that we're doing a single crochet into the stitch of the other color. And this just seals those 2 layers together and gives us a nice even finish. And then on the last stitch, again, it's not under or over anything, so it's just a regular double crochet. And now we have a nice finished piece with an even, straight top edge. You can get all sorts of different geometric patterns just by changing up when you go in front and when you go behind, but the basic concept of intermeshing stays the same, which is taking 2 layers of mesh and working them together in and out of each other to create the pattern. So that's intermeshing crochet. Thanks for watching.